the president-elect in those four states. Do you feel comfortable throwing out millions of votes of your fellow Americans?
Well, nobody wants any votes thrown out, Chris. And in fact, the 70-plus million votes that are also at stake for President Trump. Well, no, if you look at the Texas lawsuit, what it was saying is there are some states that didn't follow the laws that were on their books. The Constitution is very clear that it's state legislatures that set the process for having electors.
With all
some
due respect,
Secretary
sir,
of State changed those rules.
The Supreme Court threw that out. They didn't even hear it.
The Supreme Court said they weren't going to take the case. They said Texas didn't have standing. They said Texas didn't have standing. They didn't say they were going to address the merits. Look, the Supreme Court, I think a lot of people know, didn't want to be anywhere near this court. They don't like getting in the middle of disputes between other branches of government. And that's just something they've done throughout history.
So bottom line, even though the electors on tomorrow are more than 270 of them are going to say that Joe Biden is the next president of the United States, you're not willing to recognize him as the president-elect, and you're not willing to stop contesting this election.
Well, hold on, Chris. First of all, Joe Biden has been going through a transition that even President Trump supported, while he's also following what the court allows. There are legal challenges allowed. Nobody said back during Bush v. Gore, prior to the Supreme Court finally resolving it, and ultimately there was electors met, there was a swearing in. Nobody disputed that, maybe some on the Democrat side, but you didn't see people asked prior to that to pass judgment before it was fully resolved. Let the legal process play out. But if you want to restore trust by millions of people who are still very frustrated and angry about what happened, that's why you've got to have this whole system play out. There will be a president sworn in on January 20th. But let's let this legal process play itself out.
All right. Let me switch to another subject. We learned this week that the Justice Department...
So that was Chris Wallace earlier today, absolutely grilling Republican Congressman Steve Scalise over his Trump sycophancy, over his insistence that he kowtow to Trump and say that the election isn't fully determined yet, that he suggests that the process hasn't stopped playing out and we should respect the process. But Chris Wallace is right when he says, loud and clear, what you're trying to do and other Republicans are trying to do is take away the votes of 10 million Americans and more. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to cancel out their franchise by making these lawsuits the center of your strategy. Because Scalise, along with over half the Republicans in the House of Representatives and 17 states, including Texas, and Donald Trump, all put together a lawsuit to basically shut down the elections in Pennsylvania and Georgia and other states, swing states that went for Joe Biden over Donald Trump in the election. And there's no actual merit to the case, and there's no reason the case exists other than a desperate Hail Mary effort to try and throw out Biden's victory in lieu of keeping Trump in power. None. Let's be perfectly clear. He says in this clip that it was thrown out on a technicality by the Supreme Court. The case had no standing, they said, because Texas had no standing to bring it, not that the facts of the case were without merit. And technically that's partially true. The Supreme Court didn't hear the case, arguing 7-2 that it did not have standing, that Texas and its, co-filers did not have the jurisdiction, basically, to bring this case to them. But it's ignoring the fact that two judges disagreed with that decision. Alito and Thomas both felt they did have standing, that Texas could be heard. But what they said in a very short paragraph, and we covered it a couple days ago on the channel, was that fundamentally, even if the case is legitimate, it's a losing case. They would not have found in favor of Texas and the co-filers. So basically, 7 out of the 9 judges say the case doesn't even belong in the Supreme Court from Texas, and the other 2 says it does, but we would make you a loser if it did get in front of us. And they are 2 of the more conservative judges on the court. And if you add those 2 plus the 3 liberals, that's 5 right there, let alone less conservatives like Roberts. They wouldn't have won this case even if it was judged on the merits. And let's also remember, Let's also remember that they only went after states that Trump lost. The argument was that some of these states changed their election laws without going through proper procedure, and that was against the Constitution. And because the presidential vote is national, meaning that states that break their own rules hurt other states, even if indirectly, they have a right to intercede, which was Texas's argument. Why didn't they include every single state that changed their votes, their way of voting, their methods, adding more mail-in or more absentee ballots or all these sorts of things? Why did they only choose the states that Trump lost? And we know why, because it wasn't about integrity, it wasn't about the Constitution, it wasn't about electoral fairness, it was about a bunch of Republican thugs and cronies trying to take the election away from the American people. That's what it was about. Now, I'm going to let you know one thing here, and this is crucial, because after this is over, like the Trump base, they're going to go ravenous for years. They're not going away. But Republicans in office are going to want to tell you that, like, we've moved on from this. Joe Biden is president. We recognize him. Like, let's leave the Trump era behind us and go forward in a spirit of bipartisanship, blah, 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 blah. But that's not possible. If it was just the Trump cronies on the ground, the rank and filers, maybe. But Steve Scalise is in Congress, and he's the minority whip, which makes him one of the top 3 or 4 Republicans in the House of Representatives, making him far more powerful than other members of Congress even. This is one of the more influential people within the Republican Party, and he's 100% buying into Trump's effort to pilfer the election. So when people say, oh, we can go back to normal and have a normal political system, until every single Republican that tried to back this is turfed out of Capitol Hill, the Republican Party has to be seen as a fundamental enemy of democracy, and therefore you cannot approach them on the basis of goodwill and good faith.